welcome to today's show. The agri sector is central to any economy indeed as a matter of food security and national security. And the agri sector has been touted many times by many players in the industry to be perhaps the first hope of the Nigerian economy. Of course, we can also discuss whether we should continue to focus on raw agri exports or value addition to agri. The agri sector is actually also taking on more and higher percentage of the Nigerian GDP. Perhaps this is where our hope lies. However, of course, there's need to also reconsider our investment in in the agri sector in general, especially given that some of the natural disasters have affected that sector in recent times. As we speak, Nigeria is going through some of the worst floods in a couple of decades. And of course, this has been occasioned by a lot of losses in the agri sector. And again, this is also likely to increase even the food inflation that we have become accustomed to. At present, food inflation is about 24%, heading to 25%. This is largely unsustainable for the poorest of our people, given that the first charge on people's income is actually food. What is the way forward for the agri sector and the challenges and the prospects of this sector? It's a major issue for us as a people and as an economy. And joining us today to discuss these issues, among others, is Mr. Adefeko, who is the chairman of the export group of NACSIMA, Nigeria Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Manufacturers, as well as being the consul of Botswana in Nigeria. Welcome, Mr. Adefeko.
Thank you very much for having me.
Perhaps I didn't describe you properly in terms of your, your duties, whether in NACSIMA or in Botswana. Perhaps you want to talk to us about that a bit.
Well, as the chairman of the export group of NACSIMA, I focus on the exports. You know, Nigeria has always been touted as a monoproduct economy. Oil. Oil is usually our El Dorado. Unfortunately, we have to win ourselves off oil. We and I were just speaking offset as to why oil should always be the marker. For
exactly. Why should
oil be the marker for determining receipts, revenues, for everything for economy. If you want someone to do well, you must set standards.
Absolutely.
And give benchmarks.
Exactly.
Benchmarks that are very tough.
Exactly.
You know, because at this point in time, we're in tough times. We need tough decisions. We have to make tough decisions. I'm chairman of NACSIMA Export Group. Of course, Nigeria is a large exporter but of non-oil exports.
Okay.
That's what we usually look at because oil is a given. I mean, are we even meeting our quota?
We're not.
I think we're supposed to be doing $2.3 million. I think we're doing about 1.6.
Much less, actually.
Much less.
1.3. 1.3. Very optimistic, I think 1.3. Sometimes we do below 1 million.
Yes.
So you can imagine there's like 800,000 barrels that were not.
And in the last couple of weeks, suddenly we seem to have woken up and somebody is talking about every day now we wake up to some good news.
Yeah.
And you ask yourself, why now?
Why now?
But again. And I'm the honorary consul of Botswana. Botswana is a country of 2.3 million people with 3.2 million heads of cattle. So they have more heads of cattle than human beings.
Wow.
They are the highest per capita, diamond-wise. Diamonds are never forever.
Interesting.
For those who understand, diamonds are not forever.
They're not forever?
So they're the largest producer of beef in Africa.
Why are diamonds not forever? I mean, we're used to
diamonds are not forever.
telling us diamonds are forever.
No, diamonds are not forever. That was a movie. And that movie is an anecdote for something. So what I'm basically saying is that diamonds are not forever, just like oil is not forever. We must look for other things. So even Botswana cannot rely on diamonds forever. That's why they have diversified and they're doing beef.
A nice play on words.
No. But you know I'm a man of literature.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into our Greek sector. What's going on with that sector right now in Nigeria?
The Greek sector is
and minding the fact also that, look, I mean, when we talk about Greek sector, there's the Ministry of Agri. Well, you know, it's debatable what they're doing. I understand that Federal Ministry of Agri doesn't own any piece of land anywhere. Should that be devolved to the states, for example? Okay, the states own the land. The states should do more of the investment in Agri. That's one. And then secondly, one of the more, contemporary issues is, the central bank has invested a lot of what's it called, intervention funds in that sector. Oftentimes we hear they're having challenges getting the monies back. But what's going on? I mean, you're supposed to be the guru.
I wish I could agree that I'm the guru, but I'm not a subject expert either, but I've been a player for the last 10 years. So if I must say so, I understand the intricacies, the nuances, and all the challenges, and of course the opportunities that come with it.
Exactly.
And we must, as a nation, look at the opportunities rather than the challenges. But we cannot divorce ourselves from the challenges. The floods have happened, of course, We're talking about almost 500 to 700 people dead. I mean, the floods came like a hurricane.
Yeah.
And of course, how did the floods come about? Lokoja, that's the epicenter, the confluence town, where the River Niger and River Benue meet, and where the tributaries of those two rivers overflowed its banks. And that's why we're in a quandary as we speak.
And it overflowed up to Anambra, Delta.
Because Nigeria is, there's everywhere. Lokoja is the epicenter, but you have those tributaries in different areas.
Yeah.
So you have Jigawa, you have Nasarawa, you have Plateau, you have Anambra particularly, because the River Niger, we always talk about the Niger Bridge.
Yeah.
So the River Niger opens into that somewhere along the Anambra, the Oji River, and all that axis. You see, Nigeria is a complex.
But beautiful too, if you can manage it.
Complex country. But you see, Nigeria has always been a country where there's been rulership rather than leadership. There's a difference between being a ruler and being a leader. So we've always lacked leaders, but always had rulers. But to a large extent, things are beginning to improve. Particularly in this administration, I must give it to them for agriculture. There are two things this administration has done well: agriculture and infrastructure. But you see, you cannot have agriculture and infrastructure without security.
Exactly.
But again, climate change is real. So what has happened right now is a function of climate change. But even the climate change people who tell us about carbon credits.
Yes, they have
I think it's one of the presidential candidates that spoke to the fact and used an euphemism, which people don't seem to understand because they're not literally minded.
Exactly.
People tend to look at things from the prism of politics.
Exactly.
Let's look at things from the prism of reality. What he was basically saying, that the so-called candidate, without me mentioning names, because I'm not political.
Wait, no, this is not political.
Yes, because what he said was that, listen, the so-called Western powers that are telling us that climate change is real, that we must look at climate change, should come and help us. Because our problem is not that. Climate change is really quite all right. But again, that dovetails back into what happened for these floods. These floods, what happened? The floods were occasioned by the Lago Dam. The Lago Dam is in Adamawa State. Cameroon, for those who have a sense of history and geography, there are two types. There are two sides to Adamawa. There's Adamawa in Nigeria and Adamawa in Cameroon. In Cameroon, it's called Adamawa Province. In Nigeria, it's called Adamawa State. They are all kith and kin.
They are kin.
In Africa, we're all kith and kin. But of course, the Berlin Conference of 1884 was the one that divided all of us and put us in geographical expressions, which is now what we found out, where we find ourselves. Nigeria can only be competitive where we have competitive advantage. What did I say? Nigeria can only be competitive where we have competitive advantage in agriculture. And we have competitive advantage in many things. We're the largest producer of cassava here to import starch. Sesame, cotton. Cotton now has been dominated by what? The Far East countries. China, to be precise. Even Burkina Faso is doing better than us in cotton. We used to have cotton ginaries back in the day.
It's incredible.
But, what happened to us? I don't know how we got to this sorry pass.
I think we probably just, started taking things very easy too early. Oftentimes, I wonder how come, Côte d'Ivoire is doing almost 10 times our cocoa.
Just a minute. Sorry to cut it short. I just want to give you context. In God I trust, every other thing is data. Côte d'Ivoire is doing 2 million tons for cocoa. You know what Nigeria is doing? 240,000.
Exactly, 10 times.
That 240,000 we have been struggling. So it actually oscillates between 220 and 240,000. Aging farmers, aging farmers, aging trees.
They have a quarter our size. Côte d'Ivoire, our landmass, maybe a quarter or a third.
You see, it's not.
And they don't use their old country to plant cocoa. So how come we're not doing
what you have to look at is
well at all?
What you have to look at again in agriculture is not about landmass these days anymore. It's about technology.
Exactly.
It's about technology and it's about using what you call human organization of space.
So anyhow, but before we go down that route, what's going on with the flood? And this is not just about the flood. I want some more details about the agric sector particularly and so on. But about the flood, from Lagdo Dam, and perhaps, I don't know whether they informed us, whether they did not.
What happened?
I was in, just a minute. Yeah, I was in Adamawa about 2-3 weeks ago.
Yes.
I realized that the Benue had overflowed, even though I realized in Yola that all of the places where this flooding got to, they didn't build any houses there.
Yes.
So you could see the top of trees,
Yes.
but there were no houses that were submerged. I
Yes.
felt this was smart of them.
Do you know why?
But it's different in Lokoja and
No, but do you know
what
why?
I'm saying?
Do you know what? You know why? Because the subnationals have refused to take their destiny in their hands. Everybody blames the center. Okay?
But some people say it's because of no dredging. And then I remember that the Biafra government tried to dredge and, you know, the River Niger and Benue down to the Delta and had a lot of resistance from some ethnic groups who said that they were trying to take their lands
If the federal government,
or take their water,
if
something
the
like
federal
that.
government wants to do what it wants to do with federal might, it will do it. The Cameroonians looked at their sovereignty. You have to understand the territorial integrity of your country.
Exactly.
And say, my sovereignty is important. The Cameroonian Lagbo Dam side had been dammed. And before, what we agreed between each other was that we always inform each other that, you know what, I want to dam. But the Cameroonians, the last time this happened was in 2012, during Jonathan era. We had severe floods. But this flood that we have right now is 10 times worse than what happened in 2012. So what we should have done is to have learned our lesson. So the Cameroonians have done their bit. But guess what? We have not done our bit from our end. Why does it take, I mean, this whole fourth flood started around October 2nd, October 3rd, October 4th. It is taking almost 2 weeks to have a response. I was reading before I came on set that the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs is telling us to expect more floods. What I expect from the center is reassurance, not telling us that we have more impending calamities.
Exactly.
And what I expect again is that an interministerial committee will have been set up, humanitarian, agriculture, and environment, to look at these issues. We are going for COP. We are going for COP in Sharm el Sheikh. Do we want to start attending these meetings of climate change just for rhetoric, or want to have some action in place? We have to be serious.
So are
as a
we
nation.
saying that it's the climate change that caused this flood?
No, climate change is part of it. But if we had done what we needed to have done, we'll have hedged. I mean, you're a finance man, you understand what we mean by hedging. You have to hedge. But when you hedge and you don't hedge your bets, what happens to you is that you get into a quandary, a financial quandary. Right now, we're in a natural quandary of what to do. But you are lucky as a nation. You see, this nation is so blessed that we will not have a food crisis. What we
Are
have,
you sure?
No, we'll not have a food
Because
crisis.
that was
No,
going
we'll
to
not-
be my just a second. That was going to be my next question to you. But before you answer that question, let's take a little break and we'll be right back shortly. Welcome back to the Nationalists. We've been discussing the agri sector and some of these natural disasters of recent times with Mr. Ade Feko. Welcome back. And, you know, just before we left, we were discussing the prospects of this floods and so on. And, you know, you had the opinion that it wasn't going to have much of an effect, adverse effect. But I'm a bit wary. I don't see how it will not have, because we're talking about large, you know,
Swaths
of land
Yes.
submerged underwater. Of course, this happens almost every year, only
Yes.
that this year is much.
Yes.
Last year, 2 years ago, I remember in the Kebbi area.
Yes.
Because when you look at the geography, for those who are interested in geography, and I
yes.
really love
Yes,
geography,
yes.
you see that there's...
And not only geography, map reading as well.
a map reading,
Yes.
exactly. You see that as the River Niger flows down from Senegal or
Yes.
thereabout,
And the
when you
footage
get
along.
into Nigeria, the widest area is actually in Kebbi State.
Yes.
There's a very large
Yes, yes.
you know, tributary somewhere there.
Yes.
And so like, you remember that last year the farmers complained that a lot of the rice they grew went with the water. And in my head I was like, okay, that's, you know, risk for CBN money to be returned and all of that.
We're talking about the Anchor Borrowers program.
Anchor borrowers, you know, so and again this year, of course, you can expect such a thing, perhaps on a larger scale, because this has now gone down south, Delta State, Anambra State.
Yes.
Are you saying that we're not going to have food shortages, perhaps a higher inflation
No,
on
no, no.
food? And
See,
what
what
have
is
you?
what is
How are we going to hedge that?
what is national inflation right now is over 20%.
Yeah.
Food inflation is at 24% or thereabout. By the time we get to December, food inflation will increase to about between 26 and 28%, in my view. You know why? That's because of rice. But we must have what we call
Why
palliative.
is rice driving
Because,
that number?
no, rice is driving that number because a large number of Nigerians eat rice. And there's a particular company that was affected with the floods. About 4,500 acres of their farmland was affected in Nasarawa State. Don't forget that Nasarawa and Benue are adjoining states. So it broke all their dikes. All the dikes, and I mean, that company is still trying to recover from its losses.
That's okay.
Yes, it's unfortunately. But we at NASIMA have just appealed to, I've told the government that, you know what, we should not always be reactive. We should always be proactive. But as a nation, we're never proactive. We're always reactive. This same thing will happen next year. We'll still come back to this on set and still be saying the same thing. What I think we're going to have is going to be what we call a palette change. So
what?
A palette change. Nigerians
Palette
have
change.
palette change. We're going to
yes,
we have to change our
taste.
palette because now Nigerians will start eating cassava bread. Okay, Nigerians will start eating derivatives of cassava. Okay, derivatives of oatmeal
In place of rice or wheat or what?
Yes, because you know what, this is the only way out for some of these things. We are sometimes fixated with some of these national staples to the point in which we have become betrothed to them that we forget. So what I foresee, what I look forward to is Nigerians having what you call a palette change. We will not have a food crisis. We'll have food inflation, no doubt about it, occasioned by what has happened, which is temporary. But the swaths of land that are now affected, I mean, even the Kebbi you are talking about was not affected by the flood.
Yes, funny enough, this year.
No, it wasn't. Because you know what? Atiku Abubakar or Abubakar Bagudu took proactive measures. That's what I'm telling you, that the subnationals must take proactive measures for their states.
What did they do?
No. What he did is that he knows that he suffers from this. And he knows that his state, I'm not speaking for him, I'm just trying to tell you that why it's not, I mean, again, climate change too helped. Because sometimes when climate change is working, it works in mysterious ways. That's why God is God. And anybody who tries to play God is just trying to be, is trying to be mischievous because you can't play God. So somewhere along the line, it's just like a hurricane. They tell you a hurricane is coming, but somewhere he missed a tangent and moved somewhere else. That's what happened. Anambra, I've told you why. Anambra is close to River Niger.
Yeah.
You have I've always told you the Niger Bridge. That Niger Bridge, the popular Niger Bridge, which we are still waiting for it to be completed, infrastructure. So, there are many things that we can do, and there are so many interdependabilities.
Bayelsa is under water.
No, Bayelsa, as we speak right now, is a state of about 2.5. It's the smallest state in Nigeria. No disrespect to them. They have about 2.5 to 3 million people. Guess how many people have been displaced? 700,000. We saw, on set from your TV channel station, of corpses floating from the morgue. How gory can that be?
That's terrible.
It's a national disaster. But what I'm saying is, you have NEMA, okay? To be fair to Nimet had already announced that we'll have floods. So what happened when Nimet announced that? I expected that when Nimet announced that there will be floods around the area, around the time of X, Y, they should have set up a committee to look into that and say, you know what, how do we mitigate this? But no. Nimet, you were making it sound as if Nimet was working on his own, and it's not a federal government agency. The National Humanitarian, the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs is now reacting rather than being proactive.
But let's go back to the subject of agriculture.
Yes.
So it's just so unfortunate that in rainy season we have too much rain.
Yes.
And then in dry season, I understand that less than 10% of our land is irrigated by our rivers and dams and what have you. And so most of our farmers still rely on rain-fed agriculture.
Yes.
So what's your committee in NATIMA and Co?
What my committee
What
my committee in NATIMA is doing is to ask the Water Resources Ministry what they are doing. My problem sometimes is that some of these ministries, the gentleman in Ministry of Water Resources is somebody I know of. I don't know. I know there's a difference between knowing of somebody and knowing somebody. So I know of him. And he comes across as a very serious-minded engineer. Okay. So there are probably areas in which, the components of agriculture are very multidimensional. I know, you see, people always talk about from seed to shelf. It's a value chain. So this thing you're talking about is very, very true. Even look at the number of tractors per hectare. The number of tractors that we have per hectare as a country. Look at Pakistan, which is in the throes of terrorism. They're still doing better than us.
A lot better.
And you know what? You just ask yourself, government has no business in business. Government has business in agriculture.
Yes.
You know why they have business in agriculture? Because that's what you call food security.
Absolutely.
You cannot be a secure nation if you don't have food security.
Absolutely.
What gave rise to the uprising in Senegal, in Tunisia? Loaf of bread. Senegal, ditto. In other countries, it's always food. So there's a saying in Yoruba, take hunger out of a man's situation.
Yeah.
He's okay and settled. Like you said, the first charge
Yeah.
is food. The first charge on the family budget is food. Sometimes it's food even before shelter.
Can we begin to aspire towards like what countries like Netherlands is doing? Even though I hear the figure gets quoted oftentimes,
Yes.
but people don't understand that Netherlands is also like a hub for processing
Yes.
and export. You
Yes,
know,
yes.
so you see
Flowers.
$120
Yeah, yeah.
billion
Yes.
worth of agric exports
Yes.
on a yearly basis and so on. But what is also there is that they put a lot of science and technology.
Precisely.
You see all of those multi-layer farming
Yes.
of
What
are we
Netherlands-
ever going to get
No,
to
we
that
will get
point?
there. But what Netherlands does is what you call greenhouse.
Yes.
Greenhouse,
greenhouses.
you see, when you do greenhouse, you get results because greenhouse is what it is. But again, some people who are not very good advocates or who are good fans of GMO will complain about that and say it's GMO. GMO is what you grow organically, you know, rather than letting the soil just grow. But you know what? At the end of the day, you want to feed. You have to balance nutrition and balance health. And you have to understand why Holland is Holland. Holland is Holland. Holland and Belgium are two different countries. Not because they're two different countries, but because one is highland, one is lowland.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So Belgium is
Yes, yes. Belgium is highland. That's why you find out that to a large extent, there's not much happening there in terms of dikes and rivers and ports. So they have their port in Antwerp, they have their port in Brussels. But look at Rotterdam. That's a hub. That's a shipping hub, actually.
Yeah. It is.
And you know what they're doing there? They're the experts in dikes. So what should have happened is whoever did Eco Atlantic, again, we'll come back to another person again who made sure that Eco Atlantic, after, you know, Bad Beach used to be flooded every time.
Yeah, that was
so
where my office was.
Yeah, so somebody asked one day and said, there must be a permanent solution to this now. They call the experts. You see, when you call experts and you sit down with experts and listen to experts and don't put politics into it, that's what happened in Eco Atlantic. They reclaimed everywhere in Eco. Have you ever heard of any flood in that axis?
I'm surprised. No.
The same Eco Atlantic has been reclaimed. The American embassy, I'm told, has a plot of land there. They're trying to build a new office there, and you can go on and on. Why can we not replicate this in some of the states? You know, and for us as a nation, we throw money at everything. The Malabo Convention, okay, or statutes states that every country should dedicate at least 20% of its budget to agriculture. Do you know what most countries are doing? Most countries are doing between 10 and 12. You know what Nigeria is doing? Nigeria has been oscillating between a paltry 2% and 5% of national budget.
Wow.
So are you sure we're ready to compete? You can only compete when you have what? Comparative
But if we had that budget, if we
Yes.
had a good proportion of our budget,
Yes.
where do you think we should deploy to infrastructure around agric or what?
You see, what we must first
That
have,
will help us.
for you,
And secondly,
Yes.
before you go, there's also this. I always have this idea that we've been working on a lot of wrong data in the agric sector. For example, there was a time under a certain minister, and then they said they gave phones to 10 million farmers
yes.
to check prices or something of that sort. And I was surprised because I'm thinking, okay, are there really 10 million farmers that hold land in Nigeria? And if they do, at what amount of land does each person hold? You know what I'm saying? I'm
Yes,
saying this for a reason because it's either we're giving phones to people who are holding 1 hectare or 2 acres of land, you know, monoproduct people. And why would you be, you know, do we have 10 million of those? Are we talking of 10 million heads of households or the head of the household and his sons?
What has happened?
So 10 million out
happened-
of 200 million
what happened
Nigerians.
during- what happened-
If we're saying that
Yes.
every one out of 20 Nigerians,
Yes.
including children and very old people, is a farmer,
Yes.
are we supposed to be at this point? So 2 questions. Talk about that one in terms of, you know, the data around agric in Nigeria, number one. And secondly, you know, to think about what would government have to spend money on in terms of if we were started to comply with the United Nations recommended spend or share of the budget, which the budget I always believe that is not enough anyway. But even if we had to spend, let's say, 10% of our budget on agric, what should we be spending on?
Between you and I don't even think government should be the one spending. Government should allow the private sector thrive.
Okay.
Policy. They are big behemoths, companies that are very big, that are ready to invest in all the things government will have spent their money on. But government will not allow you to. They never create a new environment, and their policy flip-flops. I know in agriculture, policy has to be sustaining and long-term. But we're too used to ad hocism in this country that in everything we do is ad hoc. So back to your question of the minister you are talking about. You see, the 10 million he was talking about are an amalgam of cooperatives.
Okay.
So those cooperatives are different clusters in different places. So cooperative of topofascial cooperative, and then they call cooperative. So that's what it was. Because what they found out was that the middleman at every point in time was intervening in fertilizer. And that fertilizer never got to the man. So throughout, they call it an e-wallet. E-wallet scheme for fertilizer. So that e-wallet worked to an extent. But again, as with every government policy, somebody stopped it. So sustainability is an issue. And all of us run companies, and we will ask for what you call sustainability. So when you see the UN talking about sustainability, they know what they're talking about. Sustainability is at the core of any business. Because you know what? Sustainability means after you are gone, that company still remains. So what should government be spending on? Government should provide critical infrastructure.
Okay.
The one we're talking about now, it talks about dams.
Dams.
So let's not begin to rely on rain-fed. Let's have 2 cycles. Everybody does 1 cycle now. Everybody who pretends to do 2 cycles are struggling and are doing it on their own. Private companies are setting up their own dams. You see, every private sector player that is big in the agricultural sector is a government on its own.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not. So they provide their own security, provide their own infrastructure, and again, electricity is the bane. Fertilizer, people think that fertilizer is about blending or bringing fertilizer from Morocco. Morocco is the largest producer of phosphate in the world. You know, Morocco is a small country, but a big country and a rich country.
Oh, yes.
And a rich country because, one, their natural resources are being deployed to their areas of maximum benefit. They have phosphate. So they're the ones that produce all the phosphate that you use for your fertilizer, for urea and the likes. So to every country, and don't forget again, they are near Europe.
Yeah.
They are close. I mean, if you go to Morocco, you can shout on the border and be talking to them in Spain. Not too far from the Rock of Gibraltar, where, of course, politically again, between the UK and Spain. But
we have to go
no,
now.
but before we go,
Yes, 2 seconds.
back to what I said. As a country, we need to be serious. We need to cut the rhetoric. We must put our money where our mouth is. What doesn't get measured doesn't get done.
Thank you very much. We'll be speaking to Mr. Adefeko, and it's been a great one on the agri sector. There's still a lot more to say. So please, I'm going to have to come back to you to drag you back to station.
I'll oblige you.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for watching. See you next week.